Jenny Reinhard, and this is her second home, I gotta say. This really is the love of her life in the Bryan house in Orange,
Yes.
the oldest house in Orange, and we're very fortunate to have you here today.
Oh, thank you. Thank
So,
you.
Jenny, tell us your story. How'd you get started here?
Well, I did get started here when my father decided that the pipe organ he had built in Stratford was outsized and he wanted to move to a bigger town land. And he found Orange. I don't know how he found Orange, but he bought property, and my mother and I dragged our feet to come to Orange. Like, why are you sending us to Orange? There's no stores, there's no anything. But my dad had this beautiful pipe organ in Stratford, and he wanted us to come with him, so we did. Sakumpa, that's Armenian for everything. And I was in Bicentennial High School my last year, and I didn't want to go to Amity. I dragged my feet about that, but I was able to finish at Bicentennial. And I went to Stratford graduation, and then came to Orange and started to live on Barton Drive. And my mom was in the garden club in Stratford, so she became part of the garden club in Orange. So we really made ourselves at home in a town that we had never heard of. Bridgeport we knew Fairfield, but we never heard of Orange. But Orange is obviously my home since 1961. And somewhere along the line in 1964, the Orange Historical Society was founded by 5 or 6 members of the town. Again, we didn't know about that either, but eventually I was approached by Harry Jones to ask my mother and I to sit at the Stone Otis house on Sunday to greet visitors. And so we sat with the visitors. We had a little piece of paper that said Dennis Stone, Charles Otis, and I got hooked. I was in civvies. Obviously, we didn't dress like you see me dressed now. And I thought, oh, gee, this is a good opportunity. Let's get some clothes that look like Mr. Stone and Sarah Stone. So my mother and I did exactly that. And we started to spend a little bit more time at the Stone Otis house. And the Orange Historical Society was very active in that they wanted to save the history of the town, preserve the history for the future, and that's how it got started. It was the idea that we want Orange people in the future, and this is now 2022, and we have saved the future of Orange. You're sitting with me in a beautiful 1740 house. You can look around at some point when you come to visit us. We have the Stone Otis house, which was built in 1830, and that was completely restored by the earlier Historical Society members. It started out as 2 rooms rented from the town of Orange because it was supposed to be a parking lot. And the Orange Historical Society said, can we have 2 rooms? And the town said, we have a big enough parking lot. As you well know, your parking lot's ample. Exactly. So the Stone Otis house became the offices of the Historical Society, and that's how they started to eventually restore that house room by room. And that is a beautiful 1830 house with 2 families having lived there. And then the Academy building became available when the town hall was built in 1965, I believe. So the Historical Society moved into that building. And we have that one set up with a research center, which we call the Mary Woodruff Research Center, because Mary Woodruff wrote the history of Orange, 1639 to 1949. So that's research center has all the documents, all of the journals, pictures, clothing. We have Mary Woodruff's bonnet and a little cape and her umbrella. It's a wonderful research center. If you want to know who's who, or who was who, who was who in Orange. Now the biggest part of our efforts is the preservation. And this building became, it's not a building, it's a house, became available in 2000 when Mrs. Emerson complained that the Historical Society would not buy her house. And she was afraid that it would go to a real estate agent and that be demolished. Well, she went to the senior center and commented to someone, why won't the Historical Society buy my house? And I got the phone call. And I said, what house? because this beautiful 1740 house was covered completely by trees, bushes, poison ivy. You didn't know it was here. You had no idea. So I called her daughter and she said, would you come see the house, please? So our then first selectman was Mitch Goldblatt. Come on, Mitch, we've got to see a house. So we walked in and saw this 9-foot fireplace, which is behind these wonderful photographers, and we were bitten. Have to have this house. So Mr. Goldblatt said, find out about the house. Who owned it? Who lived here? Who built it? And then we'll go to the selectmen and see if they'll purchase it. And sure enough, we made a good enough case. So the town of Orange bought this house and said, well, who's going to restore it? And we said, I guess we will. So I went back to our board of directors and said, well, the town's going to buy us a house. And so here you have a completed 1740 house, completely restored. It was not damaged a great deal by the owners, but we had to undo a few things that were hidden. We had to change paint colors because it was green and it should have been red. But it's taken us this long to have this beautiful 1740 house. And how did we do it? We did it financing by ourselves with grants and neighbors and townspeople wanting us to have this a complete home. And if you'll see, we have wonderful, wonderful artifacts that we have purchased over the years, things that you wouldn't see ordinarily, like a rolling pin that doesn't roll, except you roll it, you know. A chopper, when you want to chop something, you chop this, you don't put it in a blender. You know, if you want a smoothie, this won't do it. And if you want to take something out of the oven, you certainly wouldn't use this, but you would use it in the fireplace. So everything that we have here is original. We don't have any reproductions. If we have a reproduction donated to us, we very carefully put it someplace else. But the Stone Otis House is open in the summertime. This one's open for reservations. The Academy, which is also an antique shop, is open on Saturdays. So we keep moving the Historical Society forward to keep the preservation of the town and of the people of the town. It's kind of hard to talk to the Stones when they're not with us, but some of the documentation we are able to piece together. Mr. Otis, I must say, is a relative to the original James Otis in Boston. And James Otis used to be a Whig, and when his father was taken off the bench by an English king, he became a patriot. So Mr. Otis, Stone Otis, has a very fine ancestry in James Otis. And we went by Otis Elevator today in Bristol. So when you go to an elevator and see Otis, say, oh, we have Stone Otis House in Orange. Because it's the same family, you know. So we're doing the best we can, and we love what we're doing, obviously, because I'm smiling. Our biggest effort right now is a SNET, and I didn't say SNET, I said SNET telephone exhibit, because Orange did have an SNET exchange in 1908 on Orange Center Road, and we have a wonderful picture with two little ladies sitting on the front porch with their very heavy microphones around their neck. I have one that's tiny, they have the big ones, and we are collecting telephones, and we have, in fact, I just picked up a very fine wall phone that does work. I turned the magneto and it rings. I was so excited. So that's going to be part of the 2022 exhibit, and we will have lunches here for 2022. We're going to have in our backyard the Lebanon militia doing a reenactment, and also some family members will be here. We'll also be at the Stone Otis House when the garden club shows their herb garden. And then in August, we're going to have crafters in back of the Stone Otis House, which is also going to include the blacksmith, because we do have a blacksmith shop. So we have that on our schedule so far.
Jenny, talk about the hearth cooking here. I think that's such a unique addition to this house, that you are able to.
Oh, yes, yes.
Do that, and I think that's something.
Well, behind this young lady that you can't see, but I can see her, is the 9-foot fireplace. And we had the fireplace certified and rebuilt. And the town of Orange has given us a kitchen certification so we can serve food from this hearth. And many years ago, Frances Vadney and I took lessons in Guilford. And then we also gave lessons in Woodbridge. So we're pretty good at it by now. And we do make fish cakes. We have pot roast. We make lovage potatoes. We have a apple charlotte that we make for a dessert. And we actually ask people if they'd like to come and learn how to make the apple charlotte. We set everything up on the table that they need, the lemons, the sugar, and the apples. And they make the charlotte, and then we put it in the hearth. And if they like to put the coals on top of the Dutch oven, they do. Others say no. So we tend to that. And then we give them a tour of the house. By the time the tour is finished, they come downstairs. We have tea and coffee ready, and they can have their dessert. Yeah. So that fireplace, that 9-foot fireplace does work, and the beehive oven is viable. We just have to learn right now how to make bread. We know how to heat things in the oven, but you have to heat that oven to over 500 degrees. And that's a little scary. That's a little scary.
That's a hot fire.
That's a hot fire. But you close the door. There's a metal door. You close it, and you let it do its thing. And then when it's good and hot, you take all the ashes out and put in your beans, your pie, your bread in order. So then you take them out in the same order so that you don't burn anything. The beans go in the back, and the pie goes next, and so on. But we do have fun. We really do. Excellent. You know. Bending over a hearth is not easy.
Well, it's not easy too because you've got these big cast iron pots.
They're very heavy.
Lift and move and
right. But the women in those days, they were very strong. They're very strong. Yeah. But if any one of those pots, again, in the hearth, are very heavy, and then when you put a stew in it, exactly. You know, and you're schlepping it from one area to the other, and the only way you keep them hot, cold, or whatever is with the chain hooks. And the chain hooks are one after the other, and you lower them or you raise them, and you can't, put your hand in there. You've got to, do this.
Good.
So.
Well, I think you've done, obviously, a marvelous job, and we're very lucky, and so.
Well, we love what we do.
Sign me up for one of those lunches.
I will. The second, whichever you'd like.
Good. Good. So, anything else you want to?
Well, if you want to give me any prompt, I will. Run off on it, because that's what I do best.
What do you think?
I do best on prompts. Is there anything you have questions you want to ask?
Sometimes Chris comes up with a good one.
Okay.
I think we got.
I'm trying to go through it in my head. I think we have.
Well, we said Nathan. Well, actually, Nathan Bryan and William Andrew. We need to make a note of that.
Okay.
This house was purchased. Was not purchased. Was built in 1740 and purchased by William Andrew and his brother Samuel. And that's why it's the Bryan Andrew house. And we do have documentation where Mr. William Andrew, brother had passed away, bought the house from Nathan. And this might be something interesting. I'm sitting in the middle of the house right now. When Nathan Bryan died, by English law, he gave 2/3 of the house, which is from here over to his son Nathan, and 1/3 over to his wife. So Mrs. Bryan had, by dower rights, 1/3, and their son had 2/3. Now she lived here for a while. She had access to the garret, which is the second floor. She had access to the 2 ovens, and access to the basement or cellar. Wow. She had access to the well, and she could come through here to the well. This is all spelled out in the last will and testament of Nathan Bryan, plus his inventory. Now, when the younger Nathan wanted to move to New Milford, he sold the house to William, that side. So now William had the whole thing, because his brother had just passed away. So that's why it's Nathan Bryan, William Andrew, because Nathan Bryan had it for a period of many, many years, went to New Milford, why we don't know, but he did. And then the Andrew picked up the 2/3, picked up the 1/3, Mrs., we don't know where Mrs. went. But she went somewhere.
Check the well.
So that's where the Nathan Bryan William Andrew house has the two names.
It's fascinating because I don't think people even realize that some of the houses around Orange, if you look at them, you think, God, they're really kind of little, look like half a house. And they actually were half a house. Because again, that's what they used to do if all of a sudden they were going to, a marriage came or something, and they literally would split houses in half and then kind of finish up that.
Now you're talking about Wilson H. Lee's house, aren't you?
Yes, yes.
Yes, that's fascinating, because if you go into either house, the stairway in one house goes one way and there's no stairway, but there was supposed to be one.
Exactly.
Yeah, they did. But this one was divided interior
That's
with a
fascinating.
third and 2/3.
Wow.
And she eventually, apparently, we think, went to live with one of her family members.
Awesome.
So William Andrew, Nathan Bryan William Andrew house is it. And it is our love. It is. It really is.
Very good. You had a staircase here too that you had to slightly move, right? I mean, you really
Oh.
went back and tried to.
Well, yeah, we didn't have we had a staircase behind our
Yeah.
cameraman. We had 3 pieces of staircase.
And that was it.
That was it. And that in this room, I'm going to point to a room because you can't see it, but I'm pointing, was a shower. And that room where we put our coats was a bathroom. And I looked up and I saw these 3 stairs, the riser and the stair, and I said, there was a staircase there. So we had to buy one from Brantford, an old one. So that staircase we created, and the one in the front, which was new, we took down and closed off, because there was never a staircase in the front of the house.
Wow.
So if you want to restore a house ever, listen to the house, look at the house, don't tear things down until you figure it out. Because the house will talk to you. It'll tell you, that's the color red. And what you see behind me, see this color red? That's the original red, because the door casing over there, when we took the paint off, we burned it off, the original red was underneath. And burning paint off is a challenge, believe me. Not to burn the house down. But I've done that too. I've done that too.
Yes. Oh, that's
Yeah.
excellent.
Okay.
Very good. Well, good. Thank you. Thank you.
So I guess I'll try throwing one out there. What's the significance of having or keeping, history fresh and keeping, history alive? What's the significance of that with like the town, and how does that, impact the community? And what's your take on that?
Okay.
Wow.
That is wow.
Whoa.
That's from an intelligent young man.
Yes.
History, to me, was very difficult. Okay, let me change that. In 1740, using this house as an example, because this is where we are right now, it was very difficult to live in 1740. There was no heat, there was no water running, there was a well, weather was worse than it is now. We've had snow, and people get, oh, panic is snow. They had snow. Believe me when we tell you they had snow. So if you know that there were strong people living in that time, and they still built what we have. They still built a house by hand. The fireplace, I keep pointing to the fireplace, and sometime you'll come back and take a picture of it. Brick by brick, stone by stone, by hand they did this. It wasn't a mason who put up a scaffolding. And to put the shingles on the roof, they had to climb up there. They didn't have a bucket to do what they had to do. So I think for our young people especially to feel that their life is easy, but who put us here? We have a telephone exhibit, and when our children come to see that you had to crank the phone for it to ring and say to the operator, I'd like 2010, that was a certain area, that was hard. And if it didn't work, it didn't work. Now, I had Frontier fix my phone today. I'm sitting here with you lovely people. He's climbing the pole, he's changing the wires, and when I get home, my phone will be fine. But living in this house, what have I got? What have I got to communicate with? How can I have something fixed? So I think today's people have got to know how history built. Can you show this easily?
Yeah.
This is a piece of wood, one piece. It's called a trencher, a dough bowl, excuse me, it's a dough bowl. This had to be carved by hand. And we're not talking a skill saw, we're talking a chisel and a hammer for one piece of wood. And this one even, this was done by hand. So it's important to me. Maybe it's not to others, but your question is well posed, that we need to appreciate what has come before us so we can appreciate what we have now. So I have a cell phone that sits here. Shall I show you my cell phone?
Okay.
Look at my cell phone.
Oh, she's got a.
It's a flip phone, belongs to the town, but because we do not have telephone here, this is my way of calling anyone that I need help. But am I happy with this phone? Sure. Would I like a smartphone? Maybe. But it's better than this one. But I have to appreciate this because one day in this house there was no phone. Did I give you a good?
That was
Okay,
great.
but that's how I
I
think of it.
really think history it's a choice at this point. I think, getting people involved is people who are seeking out that knowledge of finding out their relatives. I know there's a lot of Ancestry.com.
Right.
But, part of that would be, how did they live? I mean, just the curiosity alone.
Exactly.
And so you come to a place like this, you can create in your mind a vision of how people really did exist back then. But I agree, there's Chris, really, there's some people in this world, I mean, they'll never know about this place. They'll never have any desire coming to this place. But there's others that will. And I think you take it away, it's gone. We can't recreate this.
No.
So-
And that is our challenge, if I can add that to your scenario. Our challenge, the Historical Society of Orange Historical Society, our challenge is very, very hard right now because society is not into history. It's not really focused in. So we work very hard in advertising and we open this house and we sit here and we wait for people because society, and I'm not saying Orange, I'm not poking fun at us, it's just hard to get people to want to get away from the technology, to sit here at a table and ream lemons with a spoon,
Right.
peel with an old peeler, mix the apple charlotte, and then get it into the fire and cook it with coals. It's hard work. But when we do get, and it's been women mostly, around this table, they leave so invigorated and so energized because they did something different.
Nice.
And you can almost channel through people. Now, people always ask, are there ghosts here? No, there aren't any ghosts. Are there ghosts at Stone Otis? No, there aren't any ghosts.
Never
But
goes to my house.
but you can feel, do you really? Oh my. Well, you can
She's a
feel,
good ghost, which is great.
okay.
Yeah.
Does she have a name? Or he?
Daisy.
Daisy.
Daisy, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
I would welcome it, but it's not here that we are
Right,
aware
right.
of. And so we get our energy from just knowing Sarah Bryan and Nathan was here and the children. It's an energy-giving house.
Good. Well, we're very glad, seriously, to have people like you, because without people like you, this house would have been gone, and you know that.
Oh, yes, this house would be gone.
Right.
And in the back would be, because this is 0.85 acres, so it's just about an acre. There would have been a nice big house back there,
Sure.
and this would have been rubble.
Yeah.
And the same with Stone Otis House. And I have to give the town credit for that instead of tearing down the Stone Otis House when they bought it from Samuel Stone for a parking lot for the new town hall, they didn't take it down. And I'm focusing on the Bryan House because that's, as you started to say, that's love. But the Stone Otis House is a lovely, lovely Victorian home that also had people in it that worked hard
Right.
and struggled.
Right.
So we have 1 century here, 1740. We have the other century, 1830, with the Stone Otis House. So if only our town would find these places interesting, we're ready and willing to take them through.
Right.
Sometimes on one foot, standing on one foot.
Dragging. But no, I think it's great what you've done. And I like, and for the Stone Otis House, I like the way that the garden club has stepped in to do the herb garden. So now you've got another organization that
Right.
now has an output.
Right.
And, you know, and plus a place to do it right here in the center
Right.
of town.
In fact, that herb garden started in 2000 with Kim McDonald and myself, and we have a plaque, which we're very proud of, that it was the finest herb garden in the state of Connecticut, given to us by the Federated Garden Clubs.
There you go.
So we were very happy to have had the herb garden.
Put that in your bonnet, right?
Put that in our bonnet. It's another feather.